go for it.
All righty. Welcome to today's session, everyone. My name is Rachel, and I am the president of PreMedCC, a student-led organization established in the fall of 2021. Our goal as an organization was to create an online program for pre-medical students at community colleges and universities, with the hope of guiding the next generation of diverse and inclusive physicians. We know how challenging finding mentorship could be, especially in the middle of a pandemic. And while we advertise our organization for being for community college students, our events are free and open to anyone that wants to attend. We realize that finding mentorship and guidance in a pre-med journey can be very challenging, especially for first-generation med students, people that lack the financial resources, or just those that don't know people in the medical field. And one of the best parts about our event is that it's virtual, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home or wherever you are. We typically have events on Fridays at 5 p.m. Pacific time or Saturdays at 11 a.m. Pacific time. If you aren't able to attend our events, all of our sessions are uploaded onto our YouTube channel after the event. After you've attended the event, you can log on to our website and complete the quiz, which will contain questions pertaining to the session today. And if you score 70% or higher on the quiz, you will be awarded a certificate to show that you attended our session today. Students that attend all of our sessions for this school year will receive a Pre-Med Scholar Award for all of the hours of shadowing they've completed. If you want to stay connected with our upcoming events, or you want to tell your pre-med friends about our organization and how they can get some shadowing hours, our social media accounts are all at PreMedCC. And at this time, I'm going to introduce our speaker today. Madeleine Babb always had dreams of pursuing a career in medicine. After high school graduation, she attended classes at Ventura College with the goal of becoming an elementary school teacher. But she soon realized that medicine was her true passion. She then enrolled at Santa Barbara City College. There, Madeleine finally learned how to study effectively and earned numerous academic awards, such as Outstanding Student in Biological Sciences and Student of the Year in Organic Chemistry. She also served as a tutor for biology and pre-calculus classes. In 2019, she graduated from UCLA, where she graduated summa cum laude with a degree in molecular cell and developmental biology and a minor in society and genetics. She recently took the MCAT and is currently working as a surgery histotechnician before applying to medical school in the 2022-2023 application cycle. We're super happy to have her here to speak on her growth in her study skills in both undergrad and beyond.
Great, thank you very much, Rachel. So yeah, my name is Madeleine Babb, and I am also the Executive Vice President of PreMedCC. And at this point, I would kind of want to ask the participants where they're at. So if you want to say in the chat box, maybe if you're at a community college or if you're transferring. So I thought it would be fun just to kind of see where everyone is located. And then I'm going to start sharing my PowerPoint too. Okay. Is everyone able to see my screen? Yeah, okay. Okay, looks good. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, we have some people at community college. Oh, thanks, Jubin put down the breakdown. So yeah, 71% of people are still at community college. Then we have a couple people who are done. But yeah, so here's just, I'm gonna go through study skills that I found effective for myself when I was at community college and university, and then also studying for the MCAT. But I do kind of wanna preface that by saying that everybody's different, and what worked for me might not necessarily work for you. So I kind of broke down all of the options that are available, but you're really going to want to find what works for you personally. Okay, so then who am I? I'm a former community college student, and then I just recently graduated from UCLA in the winter of 2021. And I'm currently taking 2 gap years. So this is the first of my 2 gap years, and I'll be applying to medical school in June this year. And hopefully I will matriculate to medical school in the fall of 2023. And I'm currently working as a Mohs surgery histotechnician, and I'm volunteering at PreMedCC, and I'm also doing clinical research at a local hospital. And I'm a future physician. I actually found this picture and I drew this in kindergarten, and it was, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I wanted to be a doctor of babies. I'm still very interested in obstetrics and pediatrics, specifically neonatology, but I'm trying to keep an open mind because medicine, there's so many different specialties. Sorry, there's so many different specialties and, areas that you can go into. So I think it's good to keep an open mind. And a lot of our speakers have talked about how they initially wanted to do one thing, and then during medical school, they were exposed to different rotations and decided on different specialties that they hadn't considered. So yeah, I'm keeping an open mind. And then a little bit about my academic journey. So as I said, I did want to be a doctor. That's always something that I've been drawn to, but I did not do that well in high school. So I didn't have really good study skills, and I didn't really have a lot of motivation. So I kind of drifted a little bit. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I thought medicine wasn't an option for me because I wasn't able to go to university after graduating. I didn't think that you could go to a community college and then get into medicine. So I went to Ventura College for about 3 years, and I was undecided for the first 2 years. Again, I just didn't really have a clear direction. I actually, my very first year, I got mostly W's, a couple F's too. So I was able to get academic renewal and get those taken off my record. But unfortunately, because I just wasn't doing well in my classes, I was put on academic probation. So academic probation, basically I wasn't allowed to sign up for classes. I had to meet with a counselor and was only allowed to take one class at the beginning of my second year. And then I did well in that class, luckily, and I was able to take 2 classes the next semester. And then finally I was taken off of academic probation. But it was tough that second year. I was only able to take 3 classes total. So that definitely put me back. And then in my third year at Ventura College, I kind of started thinking maybe I could be a doctor. I got A's in those 3 classes I was able to take, and I was starting to figure out how to study. So I decided to revisit going into medicine, but unfortunately I needed to take a lot of classes. I hadn't taken a math class since high school, and I think I only went up to algebra 2, and I needed to get all the way through calculus. So it was definitely a long journey. And at that time, I decided to transfer to another community college, which was Santa Barbara City College. So at SBCC, that is where I started doing my GETC requirements, which are required for transfer. Also the transfer prerequisites for my specific major. And then because I was a biology major, there was a lot of overlap between the transfer prereqs and then also my medical school prerequisites. So for medical school, you have to take a year of biology, you have to take a year of physics, chemistry, organic chemistry, a lot of those classes. And that just really overlapped with my major prereqs for majoring in biology. So then after SBCC, I transferred to UCLA, and I majored in molecular cell and developmental biology, and I minored in society and genetics. And then I graduated summa cum laude, which means I was in the top 5% my grades were in the top 5% of the graduating class. So yeah, definitely a big change from being on academic probation at Ventura College to graduating summa cum laude from UCLA. So before I go into the specific techniques that I use to study—
Madeleine, can you tell them what summa cum laude means?
Yeah, so summa cum laude is basically there's different Latin honors, they're called. So there's cum laude, which means that your grades are in the top 20% of the graduating class. So that usually ends up being, I think at UCLA, it was a 3.5 or a 3.6 and above for your cumulative GPA. Then there's magna cum laude, which is the top 10%, I believe. Yeah, the top 10%. And then that's usually at 3.75-ish and above. And then summa cum laude is the top 5%. And for that, you need a 3.9, I believe, and above. And I actually graduated with a 4.0 from UCLA, but that was, I didn't have a 4.0 entirely. When you transfer to a university, they start your GPA over again. So luckily, when I was at UCLA, I managed to get straight A's and graduated with a 4.0, but I did get a few B's when I was at community college, and that was fine. I also got a few F's, and I was able to get those wiped from my record. So don't worry if you're struggling, there's options. and I'm going to go through that a bit. But yeah, going back to learning styles. I think some of the previous speakers we've have talked about finding their learning style, and this is a process. You know, and it's not definitive. It's a little bit controversial. There's some arguments that like maybe there's a lot of overlap and maybe you have a different learning style for different subjects, but I think it's a good place to start with. And basically this is, it's called the VARC model. There's a lot of different models. There's sometimes people think there's, 10 different learning styles, but I personally like this model, and it's saying that there's visual learners who need to see information to really understand it. And those are the people that maybe they do flow charts and they look at graphs, or they're able to look at a PowerPoint and kind of understand what's happening from that. Or maybe they like to draw pictures to study a subject. There's also auditory learners. So these are people that can just, if they hear it, it helps them. Maybe they're able to remember specific phrases. Maybe they go to lecture and they find that it's really helpful for them to actually learn the content by listening to the professor explain it. And then a good way for them to study would be to repeat the information, or maybe have a study group where they get to talk about the information and hear what other people think about it. There's reading and writing learners. So this is personally what I connect with the most. And that's people that like to read or write information and understand it. So, reading a textbook, taking notes on what's in the textbook, or rewriting information over and over again. And that's personally what I liked to do. Some people that might not be your learning style though, and that's totally okay. And then there's kinesthetic learners, and these are the people that need to physically do an action to understand what the process is. And these are people that work well doing experiments or working with their hands. And just to note, you can be a blend of many different learning styles, and then also what works for you in one subject or in one class might not necessarily be your learning style for other things. So I think, discussion, you can also there's a lot of overlap, but I think it's really important to look at yourself and think, what do I like to do to study? What actually helps me retain information? And just start thinking critically about that. I think there's quizzes online that you can take too to find your learning style. So it's just something to start considering. And then your studying environment. So I actually have some personal pictures in here. This was my living room table at my house that I love to study at the living room table. I also had, this is my desk in my UCLA dorm. So I think it's important to have a study space and a place that you feel comfortable learning. So that for me, it did happen to be my house. I did like studying at home, but I know a lot of people that's not ideal. And it really depends on what your home environment is. Even that can change. So studying at home is a good option if it works for you, but it might not necessarily be the best because there's, maybe you have responsibilities at home, maybe you have to babysit or care for a family member, and maybe there's a lot of distractions. So that might work for you and might not. The library is also a really good place to study. I know that it might be a little difficult with the pandemic. I'm not sure if all libraries are reopened. I think things are in the process of reopening. So the library might be a good place for you to study. And then coffee shops are really popular too. I did like studying at coffee shops with headphones in because it made me feel, it made me not want to go on my phone and goof off. It felt like there was a little bit more of a pressure to stay on task when I was out in public studying. So yeah, but with any study space, there are things that you're going to want to consider, which is, as I was saying earlier, if you have responsibilities at home, it might be difficult to study. You might need to have a conversation with your family members saying, when I'm studying, I need this specific time to really focus. There might be distractions. It's really tempting to go on your phone and, or maybe people are talking, or maybe you have roommates that are doing something in the other room, and it can get easy to be distracted. Or if you're at a coffee shop, there might be a lot of things going on. So kind of see how you feel about specific distractions, and if you really need to be in a completely quiet space, or if you're able to handle some outside noise. Sound level, I think that ties into the distractions. And then the time of day. So some people really like waking up early and studying before their classes start. That was not me. I did not like studying first thing in the morning. I found it most helpful personally to study in the late afternoon and in the evening, but a lot of people don't like studying at night either. So just kind of take a look at yourself and think about what works for me. When do I feel ready to study? What's a good time for me? And then another thing is if you like to study solo or if you want to be with a group. So some places work better at libraries. A lot of times they have study rooms that you can check out and you can study with a group, and they usually have whiteboards or chalkboards that you can write down information on. So that might be a good option for you. Or maybe you want to study solo. I know SBCC library and UCLA both had quiet sections where they had like little cubbies or little workstations where you could just focus. I would go in there and I would just kind of zone in and just focus on what was in front of me. And maybe that works better for you. And then also, switch it up, maybe do a bit of both. Maybe sometimes study at home or go and study at a coffee shop. That's actually what I did for when I was studying for the MCAT is I took my full-length practice exams in a coffee shop just so that I would have a little bit of distractions, which I thought the testing room for the MCAT would be a little more distracting, but you're kind of in little cubbies, you don't see anyone else. So, and then studying at your community college. There's a lot of resources at community college that I think people should be aware of. There's the school library, like I was saying. A lot of times school libraries will have quiet sections or they'll have places where you're able to go and study. Also, a lot of time if you don't have access to a laptop or if you don't have access to a laptop, a lot of times you can check out a laptop at the community college library. So that might be helpful if you want to take notes in class or if you want to go over PowerPoints. Another thing that they have is study rooms. As I was saying earlier, you can usually check out a study room or reserve it and then study with a group, study with some of your friends or classmates. There's also studying labs a lot of times at community colleges. So I know both Ventura College and SBCC had writing centers where you can go and study. Even if you're not writing, you're allowed to go and use that resource, just ask and they'll let you. Math labs. There was a big math lab at SBCC where there were tutors just hanging out and you could go and talk with the tutor, computer labs, etc. And then there's Mesa is a really, really helpful resource. A lot of the speakers we've had who have started at a community college and are now physicians, most of them recommend Mesa. So Mesa stands for Math, Engineering, Science Achievement, and it's a program that is usually at community colleges. I'm going to say most community colleges in California have a Mesa program. And basically, a lot of times they offer different support and resources to students who might be underrepresented in STEM. So maybe if you're a first generation college student or low income, they'll have resources available, or even just if you like science and you want to go and meet like-minded people, Mesa is a really good program for that. And then also I know at SPCC, they allowed you to check out laptops too, and they had tutors hanging out who could help you. And then kind of tying into that, there's tutoring resources. So most community colleges have some tutors available. If you don't know where to start, maybe check in with the library and ask them if there's a tutoring center, or then also asking your professors if they know any tutors will help. I also wanted to mention there's disabled student programs. So if you have any sort of difficulty, if you maybe ADHD or hearing issues, or even just if you get anxious, you can talk to, there's usually programs at community colleges where they'll offer you different services. So I don't think you need a diagnosis or anything, but just if you need extra support, they're more than willing to work with you. I have a friend who, she gets really distracted when she hears a lot of noise going on and like pencil tapping. So she was able to take tests in a private location with like a proctor and not have to be in the big testing room. So, if you have any sort of difficulty, they're usually willing to work with you, and you can get someone who could, you might be able to get extended time on your tests. You might be able to get access to recordings of lectures. And then also a lot of times they'll have designated note takers. So if you struggle taking notes in class, you can, another student will take notes and then you get a copy of their notes. So yeah, just also ask your professors. That's one of the best things about community college is you're in small class sizes. A lot of classes have maybe 30 people at the most, where at undergrad, once you transfer, you're going to be, just a fish in an ocean. There's so many people, there's so many students, and the professors at community college are there because they love to teach. They don't have as many distractions as, say, a professor at a university who is doing research, and that's kind of their primary job, is that they're doing research and then they have to teach. So they might not necessarily really want to teach. Whereas at a community college, all of the professors are there because they actually love to teach. So go and talk to them. I really encourage you to form a relationship with your professors, show up to office hours, stay after class and ask questions. Just, they're there because they want to teach. So they're going to be willing to work with you. And a lot of the doctors that we have talked to and had, a lot of the speakers have said that they got letters of recommendation from their professors. They have long-lasting relationships with their professors from community college because they're going to actually really get to know you on a way that you won't have once you transfer. And then, so yeah, your local community college might not have all of these resources. Maybe you live closer to a smaller community college. So for me personally, at Ventura College, this was an issue that I was facing when I decided I want to go into medicine. They didn't have as many pre-med track or pre-med community, almost in a way. So I transferred to Santa Barbara City College, which was about 40 minutes away from me, but it was a much bigger school. They had an anatomy lab with cadavers, and they had people that were really focused on going into pre-med, and they had a little bit more support for that, I found. So I would consider transferring to a larger community college if that works for you, but then if you're able to commute, that's always a limiting factor. Okay, and then I'm just going to jump into it, studying for classes. So I kind of split this into two different sections because what I found is what works for studying for biology classes, anatomy classes, physio, all of those science classes that are really memorization heavy. It's very different than studying for, say, chemistry or physics. So with studying for bio, like I said, I personally really like to rewrite notes. This was something that I found helpful, and some of the speakers that we've had have touched on it before. So basically, I would go to lecture, I would take quick notes on what the professor was saying, but I wouldn't focus on making it look nice. I would just get down the info. And later I ended up getting an iPad, which I thought was really helpful because I was able to download the lecture notes ahead of time and then just write on the lecture and just jot down information quickly. So that was that helped me. And some of the physicians that we've had have also mentioned that they would kind of just go to lecture and stay engaged and listen, but really a lot of the learning is going to be after. And for me, that was, I would rewrite the notes. So you can see here, this is actually a picture of one of mine. I had about 24 of these little notebooks. I got them on Amazon. I think they're called Campus notebooks. They're Japanese. I loved them. And I just, I would take my notes from class that were on just lined paper, and I would rewrite everything, and I would draw out the pictures and just really look at the information. And having to reword info is super helpful because you really have to process it. It's one thing if you're just copying down what's on a PowerPoint word for word, that's not actually going to help you that much because you're not really interacting with the material. So it's important to, you really want to think it through. And I felt that rewriting forced me to think about things in different ways and how to reword something. And then also if I was writing something and I just didn't know, like I didn't understand what it was, it would force me to kind of step back, and then I'd go and look it up online or look at my textbook and really think about the material. Also, for me, it was enjoyable. This was an act, I really liked making them look nice, and I liked, having different colors and all of that. It made it fun for me. So that was what I like to do, but that's not necessarily for everyone. I do think that, I think it's a really good way to do it though. And I know a lot of the physicians we've had have mentioned that rewriting notes help them a lot. So something to consider. And then also making a study group. So here we have glycolysis happening in here. And a lot of times in bio, we'll get these complicated pathways that we need to memorize all of the steps of. And it can be a lot to do by yourself. So I found it to be really helpful to go and to talk with some of my classmates and then talk through the pathways and explain it. And, we can double check each other. So we'd say, who wants to explain this one? Or can somebody explain this to me? And then another student would happily start explaining it and going through the pathway. And I found that was really helpful just because it gives you the opportunity to kind of double check your info. And then also there's studies that show that if you can explain something, that's really when you know that you've mastered the information, because you're able to talk through it in a different way. So yeah, so I encourage you to make study groups. And if you're struggling with meeting people in community college, that's completely understandable. It's tough, especially in a pandemic. So I would encourage you to use the resources, go to the Mesa Lab. You'll likely meet people in your classes, or you'll meet people that have taken these classes and are willing to talk with you. Also, I know at UCLA, we had GroupMes. I don't know if if anyone else uses that. So GroupMe was kind of like a chat feature. People at the beginning of the quarter at UCLA, but at the beginning of the semester, would post in the discussion board on our class websites, here's the GroupMe link. And then everybody signed up for GroupMe, and it was just a way to talk through questions and meet people in your classes. So if you don't have that, you'll definitely see that once you transfer. I think pretty much every university uses GroupMes, but you can make one. Yeah, you could use it in community college too. And then another thing is Quizlets and Anki and flashcards. So for some things, you just have to memorize it. It's just repetition. In bio, you might have to memorize all of the enzymes in glycolysis, or maybe you have to memorize taxonomy. So a lot of times with anatomy and biology, it's just memorization. So repetition is going to really help you with that. I personally really like Quizlet. That's been the one that I've used the most often. I have Quizlets for organic chemistry and for biology, and even for the MCAT, I used Quizlet a lot. So I would encourage you to check Quizlet out. I know they also have explanation sections where they'll have more detailed explanation for textbook questions. So that's something to check out. Maybe if you're struggling to understand how they were able to find an answer in a homework problem that's in a textbook, you can go on to Quizlet on the explanation section, find that specific question in the same textbook, and they'll have a more detailed explanation available. So I found that really helpful for calculus classes. And then studying for chemistry, math, and physics. So for this, rewriting notes is not going to help you as much, is what I found. A lot of it is repetition. So with chemistry, you're going to have actual problems that you have to solve. And the same thing with math, specifically calculus and physics. It's just going to be a lot of doing the problems. So it's really important to finish all of the practice problems that are assigned. A lot of times in community college, they're worth points too. So if they give you practice problems from the textbook that you need to complete, make sure you really are doing those, and check your answers and check your work. And then also I thought it was really helpful to find new ones from the textbook. So for my organic chemistry class, we had assigned problems, and sometimes they're online, but in ours, they were from a textbook. I would do all the homework that was required, but then I liked my friends in my study group, we would actually go through and find the challenge questions that the textbook had, and then we'd work through all of those. And we actually found that a lot of times the professor kind of took inspiration from those questions when he was writing the exam. So it's good, you're just trying to, you're just getting as much practice as you can with that, and that'll really help you with these sorts of subjects. And then if there's topics that you don't understand, watch videos, you use YouTube. I found YouTube videos to be really helpful. There's Khan Academy is one of the big ones. I really like the organic chemistry tutor. He does OChem, but he also does chemistry, physics, and math subjects. So sometimes it's nice just to have somebody explain it to you in a different way. AK lectures, this one is really going to help you more once you transfer. He has a really good biochem course, but I know he also has chemistry, physics, and some of the classes you're going to be taking at community college. And then recorded lectures. So this helped me immensely. I took my second chemistry class online over the summer, and it was an accelerated class. So it was just so much information in such a short amount of time. I actually would watch recorded lectures of different classes. I know MIT has their chemistry class recorded and available online. So I would watch that before my class and just kind of get an idea about the information. And then when I was in my actual in-person class, I was able to ask better questions because I already kind of was a little familiar with what we were going to be talking about. So yeah, on YouTube, you can find recorded lectures for classes at MIT, at Harvard, Stanford. I think UC Berkeley even has a couple classes online. You just Google, Google recorded lectures or like chemistry, MIT, something like that. And you'll get all the lectures on. So maybe you don't have the best professor for a certain class. That happens sometimes. You can use a recorded lecture for something else. There's a lot of overlap. And then just another thing is taking notes to stay engaged in lecture. Personally, I love biology. So I was super into my bio classes, and I was always paying attention because I wanted to know what was happening. But I didn't like physics that much. So I would kind of struggle with checking out and zoning out a little bit. And I really had to push myself to stay engaged. It's easy to go sit in the back and be on your laptop and get distracted, but you're hurting yourself when you do that. You really do want to try to stay engaged in lecture. That way you can ask questions and have an understanding of what's going on. So I think taking notes, even if it's just jotting down the problem as the professor is doing it, just doing something so that you're staying focused and present. And then we have transferring. So I was so nervous to transfer when I was at CC. I know I'd heard a lot of things about transferring that weren't necessarily true. So I kind of want to just touch on some of that right now. A big concern is switching from a semester system to a quarter system. So the semester system, it's different at most schools. I think at SBCC it was 16 weeks, but I've heard it's 18 weeks or 15 weeks, like it changes. Anyway, the semester system is usually a lot longer. So that's when you're going to have your fall semester and then your spring semester. And quarter system, on the other hand, is 10 weeks. And you have 3 of them. You have fall, winter, and spring quarter. And they're just go, go, go. You have 10 weeks to get the same amount of information. So that's the trickiest thing, is switching from the semester system to, it's very condensed when you go from semester to quarter. It's the same amount of information. It's just condensed into a shorter period of time. So I noticed in the semester system, you usually have like a little bit of downtime towards the like week 12 or week 10 of the quarter semester system. It starts slowing down a little bit, where you don't have that in the quarter system. Like if you take a weekend off studying on the quarter system, it's going to hurt you, because midterm, you have your midterm at week 5, and then you have your final. So you only have the 2 exams. Whereas in a semester system, I think we typically had 4 exams, where it was 3 midterms and then a final. It's going to be different at every school, but yeah, it's just a lot faster. And then most UCs, except UC Berkeley and Merced, are on the quarter system. I was looking it up, and it looks like a lot of schools on the West Coast are on the quarter system, not the CSUs, but most of the like other public schools were on the quarter system. So it's just something to be aware of. And it's a big adjustment for a lot of people when they transfer. I know we talked about it often. I personally liked it because you're exposed to so many more classes and so many more subjects, because you have you have the 3 quarters. So you're able to take a lot of different classes, but it is fast and it is an adjustment. So you have to hit the ground running. Like you need to start studying day 1 on the quarter system. Whereas in CC, I felt like we usually had syllabus week, where you had a little bit of downtime at the beginning. Another thing is curved grades. So I've heard, this was what I was the most nervous about. My professors would say, oh, and at UCSB at the organic chemistry class, there was a curve. So they just, if like a 97% in the class would bring you down to a B because everybody else was scoring that well, like it would bring you down. They'd have to adjust it downwards. But that is not what I found. Maybe that's how they used to do it, but now the curve always is there to help you. So I took a molecular parasitology class at UCLA, and I think the average on one of the exams was, I got an F on it, which was terrifying. I hadn't gotten an F in a long time on an exam, but because of the curve, it actually brought it up to a B, just because everybody else did poorly. So that's how classes are curved at UCLA and at most universities. There's usually like a base. If you get a 90%, you're going to get an A regardless. But even if like the average is around there, they won't bring your grade down. But if the average is like a 50%, then they'll bring that up to you'd be getting a C. So it'll just boost you. It never is going to bring you down. Larger classes at university. So the class size at Santa Barbara City College was, I think for at the most, it was probably like 70 people, which is still pretty big, but at like biology at Santa Barbara City College and at a lot of larger community colleges would be, maybe 70 to 100 people. Whereas if you're taking those lower division biology courses at a university, you're going to be in a classroom with like 300, 400 people. They're massive, massive lecture halls. So it's good to be able to get those classes like bio, chemistry, OChem, to have them in a smaller class size than at a university. You're just going to be like, there's so many students in those classes. So that's something to keep in mind. The upper division classes, so once you transfer, you're going to be taking upper division coursework. So lower division is going to be all the classes that you're taking at a community college right now. So, your chemistry, bio. But then once you transfer, you go into upper division where you're really in your major, specifically, like you're just doing your major classes. And those are smaller, but they're still bigger than community college. So there's still, I think I usually had about 100-ish people in my my major classes at UCLA. So it's still big. And it's, like I was saying, it's difficult to get to know your professors just because they're usually there because they're doing research and that's their main priority. So, they're not really reaching out to students quite as often as a community college professor would be. And then another thing is the homework. So at CC, a lot of times we would have homework problems that were assigned and you actually had to do them to get a grade on them and they were required, but that's not necessarily the case once you transfer. So I've had a lot of times practice problems that are just, the professor will say, oh, and I uploaded some practice problems online if you want to go through them, but they're not required. A lot of times you don't actually have to do them, but you kind of do need to do them if you want to do well in the class. So it's tough because it's not required. It won't hurt, like it won't help your grade at all, but you really have to get familiar with the content to do well in the exams. So that's something to pay attention to. And you just have to be responsible for your own education. If you want to go into medicine, you're going to have to push yourself. You're going to have to be disciplined. So it's tough. You still have to do those practice problems. And I remember I would talk with my friends and some of them didn't do well on the exam and they were upset. And they said, I didn't do any of the practice problems though. So I don't know what I was expecting. So that happens. You have to be accountable. And then there was one other, I didn't put a bullet point for this, but yeah, I lost it. Never mind. And then the last thing I wanted to go over was studying for the MCAT and just kind of touching on this briefly because there were a few things that I wasn't aware of when I was at CC that I kind of wish I had known. So the first thing is if you want to go to medical school once you graduate, like if you want to immediately graduate from your transfer university and then enter med school the next fall, you actually have to take the MCAT the summer before you transfer. or yeah, you have to take the summer before you transfer, or fall, or March, I think, March or April of your first year. And that's because the medical school application cycle, you're going to apply in June. So like I'm applying June of this year, 2022, but it takes a full year. The cycle takes about a full year. And then you start in the fall of, for me, I'll be starting in the fall of 2023. Sorry, one moment. So yeah, that's just something to be aware of. I didn't know that. Sorry guys, 1 second, I gotta cough a little bit. I'm just gonna mute for a sec. Sorry about that. So yeah, for the MCAT, determine if you want to take a gap year, because maybe you don't MCAT right before you transfer. So if you decide to take it the next summer, then you're going to be taking one gap year. And then what I did was I took it the summer that I graduated. So I have to take 2 gap years. And then also save your notes, because a lot of the MCAT content is on lower division science classes. So that's what you were taking at community college. So really, you're pretty much ready to take the MCAT after you, when you're transferring. But I would recommend still doing 1 year at your transfer university, just because you can take biochem, which biochem's on the MCAT a lot. And it's not required, but it's definitely helpful to take. Oh man, sorry guys, I got a cough again. I had COVID 2 weeks ago and I'm still getting over it. So just 1 second. Okay. So yeah, for studying for the MCAT, expect to study full-time for 3 months. So a lot of people will take that summer and just focus on the MCAT. That's all you're doing, because it's definitely a lot of content. And then you can also study part-time for a longer period of time. I said 6 months, but honestly, you could do it, you know, just for as long as you want. Definitely give yourself a good amount of time to do it, to study though. And also use your time wisely. I had the Kaplan MCAT prep book, and I read through every chapter. I took notes on every single chapter. I have a Google Doc that's like 300 pages full of notes on the Kaplan thing. It took me like 2 months. That's all I was doing. And I regret that so much. I really regret that. It's not necessary. You know, a lot of the things you'll remember from your classes already. And you also, it's the way that the MCAT is worded, that doesn't necessarily help you. If there's a subject that you're struggling with, definitely look at it. But yeah, I think that was honestly a waste of my time. And then what's really going to help you the most is practice problems and practice exams. So that was, I spent 2 months just doing content review from the Kaplan book, and then I only spent 1 month doing practice exams. 1 sec, guys. I haven't talked this much in a while. Yeah, lots of talking. I'm almost done now. So I just wanted to go over the practice problems. What I found was really helpful is here's like an actual screenshot from my, I had like a Google Slides where I went through everything. So I'd write down which problems that I missed. And I really looked at the problems that I got wrong and why I got them wrong and what the right answer was. I think that was super helpful. I saw that recommended online, and I decided to do it because I saw other people talking about it. And honestly, I think that's the most helpful thing, because it's one thing if you take the practice exam and then say, oh, I got this score, great, and then walk away and never think about it. But if you actually go through and look at the problems you got wrong, then if you see something similar in the future, you'll be able to, you know, learn from it. And it's good to identify any weaknesses and like problem areas that you need to review more often. And then I just want to say, PreMedCC, we actually in October, we had Ken Tao, who is at med school coach. I think I included their logo over here. And he went through, I think he did like 3 hours of MCAT prep and how to study for the MCAT and different techniques that he tells. And I mean, they charge like hundreds of dollars for consulting, and he did it for free. So we have that available on our YouTube channel, and you guys can check out what he said if you want to get a little bit more information about studying for the MCAT. And yeah, I think, yeah, that's everything on my end. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Yeah, I just kind of want to open this up to Q&A. If you guys have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A section. It kind of keeps it a little bit easier on our end. So if you have any questions about transferring or classes that you need to take or anything, just feel free to put them in there. Okay. So we have, what are the main classes on the MCAT? So the MCAT has 4 different sections. One second, guys. Okay. So the MCAT has 4 different sections. You have the first section. When you first walk in, you're going to take, it's called Chemical and Physical Foundation of Biological Systems. So that's going to be your Chem and Physics and OChem section. So it's all things that you would take at a community college before transferring. So, you know, there's a lot of physics questions on it, a lot of chemistry. It's very surface level. It's not super difficult. You don't have to do calculus. You're not allowed to have a calculator on the MCAT. So you have to get familiar with a little bit of like mental math, but it's not too difficult. One thing, a huge thing in that section is you have to go through unit conversions. So make sure you know how to do unit conversions, because honestly, that I learned it in undergrad and I was familiar with it, but it got a little bit tricky on the MCAT. So you have that, and then the next section is bio and biochem. Or sorry, the next section is called CARS, which is critical analysis and reasoning skills. And for that, they just kind of give you like a passage about anything, and you have to read it. And then they ask you questions like, what was the author's main point? What were they arguing for? What did this mean? So for that one, it's a little tricky. There's not an actual class. It's like English class, I guess, but it's really about understanding information. Then you have the bio and biochem class, which is a lot of things about anatomy, physiology. I know renal physiology was a big thing on mine. Yeah, that's like the biochem. And a lot of times those questions are like, here's a scientific journal article, and then what did this result mean in this question? So you have to be familiar with interpreting data. And then the very last section on the MCAT is the psychology and sociology section. So a lot of psychology and sociology, basically. For that one, you could take, I think some medical schools require you to take a psych class. So I would recommend taking like Psych 101, because a lot of that will be on the MCAT too. It's not necessary though, depending on what schools you're looking at, but you can learn it yourself, honestly. There's a lot of resources available online.
Yeah, you need to have one psych and one social. I think it's becoming the standard for a lot of the schools.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's honestly, you can take those at community college. And I took psychology and sociology when I was still thinking about becoming a teacher. So I took them online. I think that's a really good way to do it, and just get it out of the way. Can you go over the timeline of taking the MCAT and applying for med school? Yeah, so this was tricky for me. I wasn't aware of this when I was at community college. I remember I transferred, and I started meeting people in my biochem class, and they had already taken the MCAT, and I was so focused on just transferring that I didn't even realize that the MCAT needed to be done that soon. So basically the MCAT, there's the times that you're able to take it in January, and then there's a section where you can take it there's test dates from March to September, I believe. And it's like that whole time there's test dates every weekend, but then it stops being offered. So like you couldn't take the MCAT in October or November. You can only take it in January or between March and September. So that's something to keep in mind. When you're applying to medical school, the application cycle opens on June 1st. So you need to have your MCAT score ideally before June 1st. You can't apply to schools without your MCAT score yet, but a lot of schools, it doesn't look, it kind of depends on where you're applying. Some schools are okay with that, but other schools really want to see your MCAT score in your primary application. So that means that you need to take the MCAT by, I believe, April is what I've seen online. You need to have it done April before you apply. So if you apply in June, you need it done in April, apply in June, and then you have that whole year of the cycle where you're doing interviews, you're doing secondary applications, and then you get accepted in spring, maybe late winter or spring, and then you start medical school the next year. So it's a little bit tricky. Basically, if you want to have a full summer to study and you want to have a lot of time to really focus on the MCAT, you want to get it done the summer before your junior year. Because then you'll you'll have your MCAT score done in the summer, then you'll apply the next June, and then you'll get in, and then you have to wait another year. It's a little tricky. So that's if you don't want to take a gap year. What I did personally is I decided to take the MCAT after I graduated. So I took the MCAT, and now I'm doing my gap year, my first gap year, and I'll apply to medical school. And then I'm going to wait another year to actually get into medical school and start.
And just one thing though is, let's say the MCAT date is, I don't know, January 21st. Like you can't sign up for it like January 1st. Like people sign up months and months ahead, and because they're done at testing centers in front of computers, so the spaces are very limited. So I know like some of the busier dates of like, a lot of people like to take it in August and September. You literally, like I knew somebody that traveled something like 800 miles to take the MCAT. I think they went to Idaho or something to take the MCAT because everywhere else where they were at, they couldn't take it. So it's like this is something you prepare for. You just don't say, I'm going to study and see how I feel it. You literally takes months and months. I mean, I know people, the whole gunner syndrome, they sit there when they wait until the release date, and literally like at 12:01 they've signed up already, and you're gonna have to kind of be that little gunner because the spots fill out. So if you're the kind of person who likes to sleep, wake up in their own bed and drink their own coffee, all those things, you may not be able to do it, and you may have to like travel far distances.
Yeah. I was one of those people that was waiting. I think the MCAT score times would be like, they'd open it up. You can on the AMC, which is the resource for all the MCAT stuff, they say what day they open up the spots. So I knew that I needed to be on my computer at 9 a.m. on this specific day to sign up for the MCAT. And even then, even though I was, I went onto my computer at like 8:52 or something, and I got put in a wait list because technically it opened 10 minutes before, and there was already, I had to be on a wait list waiting to get onto the website so it didn't crash, because it's pre-med students. A lot of them are going to be really intense. So there's going to be people already waiting to sign up. So it's something just to keep in mind. You really want to determine if you want to take a gap year early, and then find out when the MCAT application cycle opens. It's on the AMC website. So yeah, what were my struggles as a student and how did I overcome them? Yeah, I struggled a lot. I had a tough time in high school. And I think it was, I don't know, there was stuff going on, but I think it was really, I didn't like to do homework. I didn't think it was important. I would get distracted in class a lot. In high school, I used to draw constantly. So I kind of took that drawing. I like art, and that was always something that I enjoyed doing. And I kind of learned how to channel it into a way that was helpful for me instead of holding me back. So instead of doodling in classes, I had to push myself to pay attention in classes. That took a lot of discipline. And I think that's part of why my academic journey has been so long, is that a lot of it was just when I was younger, I just didn't care as much. And then as I got older, I really got better about pushing myself. And then also I just, I kind of like learned how to channel, for example, drawing and doodling. I was able to channel that into rewriting my notes and making sure my notes looked nice. And actually it helped me. So I think it's important to look at what you struggle with and then kind of see what you like. And that's why I showed that visual or the learning styles thing, because I think you can, once you understand more about who you are and how you learn effectively, it really will help you succeed in classes. And then another thing is I didn't like to do homework, and I kind of learned that like, you're going to have to do homework. That's something you just have to really push yourself to do. And maybe you enjoy doing it with a group. So maybe it's difficult for you to do problems on your own, but if you're working with a group, it's easier. So try different things, be patient with yourself too. It's okay. I think we can all be so hard on ourselves and think, oh, I got a C on this exam, I'm never going to do well. I got C's on exams. I got F's on exam. I was saying that earlier, and I got an F on that test, and I still got an A in the class. So even if you're struggling a little bit, it's not the end of the world. Talk to your professors. A lot of times they're accommodating. Maybe you're able to retake, or you can I'm trying to remember what it's called, but a lot of times professors will let you redo some problems to raise your score a little bit. So talk to people, and then maybe there's circumstances outside of your control, and professors are typically understanding, especially at a community college. A big problem I have with bio and chem classes that I don't have the content down is that I feel like I have the content down, but still do poorly on tests. I don't know if it's test taking anxiety, but could you share your strategies for scoring well on tests? Yeah, I've been there before. I think a lot of it is practice problems, like I was saying earlier. Maybe, it's one thing to feel confident about the content itself, and maybe, oh, I get this makes sense. But then when you start doing practice problems, it's like, wait a minute, this does not make sense. So that's what I was, when I was saying earlier, looking in the textbook and looking at problems that maybe weren't necessarily assigned, or that take different information in, and working through those, just to make sure that you can apply what you've learned in the class. For chem in particular, you want to show that you can apply the knowledge in a different situation. So I think it's easy to feel really confident with the content and be like, oh yeah, I get this. And when you're reading your your lecture notes, it's like, yeah, I understand that. But then it's another thing to apply it. So for chem classes, I think a way to apply that knowledge would be to do practice problems. And then for bio classes, I think a way to show that, to apply the knowledge, would be to explain it. So if you have a study group, talking through the content with people in your group will show you oh, maybe I don't get this because I can't explain what comes next in this pathway, or I don't really get this. So actually saying the information out loud will help you a lot, and will make sure that you really, really do have the content down, because it's one thing to be able to read it and be that makes sense, and another thing to be able to really apply it. And then also testing anxiety is definitely something to pay attention to. So if you feel like you have test taking anxiety, like I was saying, there's options available, even if you're not diagnosed with anxiety. But if you still struggle with it, at community colleges, there's often DSPS is what we called it, which the Disabled Students Program. So it's for anyone that has any sort of difficulties, and they can work with you. So maybe you can get a little bit of extended time on your tests, or maybe you can take your test in a different environment to help you calm down. Whatever works for you. So yeah, I would encourage you.
So let me just add this to something. So legally, any institution that accepts federal funding, they have to accommodate. So if you think that you are struggling with a class, or that you have studied this stuff and you know it backwards and forward, and then you take the exam and you do poorly, you can walk into any place and say, look, I think I have a problem and I need help. And they, a lot of community college place, can give you the exam, can refer you to people that you could go to. But most of the places do it themselves, and they make you take these tests, and you could figure out, okay, like I do have a learning problem. I think the first step to admitting that you have a problem to fixing a problem is first admitting it. And so if you are struggling, they have to provide you those resources. So this is not that they're trying to be nice, is that if you complain to the Department of Education, they will lose their funding. And certainly if you're in a state like California that has a lot of protections for students and disabilities and those things, you can get help. But you need to take those first steps. Nobody's going to, walk you in there. And there's no shame in that. Like I personally, like I have a little bit of ADHD and I have dyslexia. And so I need a little bit extra time on my exam. And I even had somebody make a comment to me that, oh, you're faking it and you're getting an extra time. And I said, oh, really? So are you willing to be liable for your comments? Because I've been tested and I've been diagnosed. And so don't care about what people say or what people think. I know there was always this joke about, oh, well, that's the short bus people that go over there. And bottom line is you want to be successful. And if you need support and help, and this is not just at the community college, this is at the University of California medical school. There's also extended time for MCAT. So there's all of these things that are available to you that are federally mandated. So this is not them trying to be nice. And and some people say, well, you're trying to game the system. You really can't, because if you have to take those tests, that it has to be proven. And a lot of people have anxiety, ADHD. I didn't know I was dyslexic until somebody told me that they think that I am, because they themselves were dyslexic. So I didn't know I was dyslexic for a long time, and I thought I was just stupid. And they're like, no, the way you write your things, that's the same problems I had. And sure enough, I went and got tested, and I am dyslexic. So, and I know somebody who's an orthopedic surgeon who's dyslexic, who takes steps to make sure he doesn't amputate the wrong leg. So, so that doesn't mean you're broken or there's anything wrong with you or you're lesser than anybody.
Yeah, definitely. These resources are available, and it's up to, some of the smartest people I knew had extended time for tests because they were a little bit ADHD or, anxious. So those resources are available, and I really, really encourage you to look into it. And then, I think there's absolutely no shame. They're available. That's what they're there for. So something to look into. And then I'm a transfer at UCLA and really struggling in organic chemistry, physics 1, and bio classes. Any tips? Okay. First of all, congrats. Go Bruins. But then also for organic chemistry and physics, I think a lot of it comes down to the repetition. So I know for the bio classes at UCLA, you have to do, I think they're called Launchpad. I'm not sure, but there's like questions that you have to do for like homework. If you're taking organic chemistry, physics 1, and bio all in the same quarter, that's a pretty tough quarter. So one thing, maybe it might be possible to stretch your classes out a little bit more in the future. That might help a bit. But then also, UCLA, I don't know if you're aware of this, there's a test bank. So I don't think they have any of the bio classes, but they might have organic chemistry and physics. So in the Student Services Center, there is a test bank, it's called, and they have all of the old exams from from previous classes. So you can get access to those exams and maybe look over just so you have an idea of what to expect on the exam. If your class has a group me, I know UCLA has a lot of group me's. So if there's group me's available for your classes, I would definitely encourage you to join them and then maybe meet some of the people in the classes so that you could study together. That's what I did. I had like Zoom study sessions with people. One of our study mates was like in India, and then we had somebody else who was in Washington. We were all spread out, but we'd still meet over Zoom to go over content. So I would encourage you to reach out to your peers and do practice problems, look in your textbook and see the problems that are in there. And then also,
yeah, obviously you're smart enough to transfer to UCLA. I mean, you had to have at least above a 3.5 GPA, but I would say like if this is your first quarter, or those are like a lot of classes that you're taking, unless you're not doing anything else like driving, working, anything else. To me, I just think those classes, I mean, those are really heavy classes, certainly at UCLA. And if you're all taking them together, that's like nobody's going to give you a cookie for finishing that many classes that fast or together. Um, there is no reward for doing it all together, but if you get B's and C's, there's going to be a massive punishment. So a massive punishment is just you're going to have a lower GPA. So I would say don't take more than 2 science classes a quarter. I don't know. Is that
Yeah,
what you did?
I was going to say, I think it's helpful to do 2 science classes a quarter and then one, we were saying earlier, maybe like psychology class or sociology class, because those will be on the MCAT. Also, you can take classes during summer. That was something that I did. And that's part of why I graduated a little bit early, was I took classes in the summer, and it helped me have a easier caseload during the year. So yeah, I think in the future, I would definitely recommend just doing the two hard science classes and then taking another, maybe for your minor, maybe something more enjoyable. And then also, I was also going to say for UCLA, I know in particular that they do have pass, no pass classes. So at this point, if you're really, really struggling, maybe considering taking a class pass, no pass, talk to, I know there's not really many advisors at UCLA, so that makes it a little bit tough, but I would, maybe talk to your professor about it and see what they recommend. But yeah, I think it's a heavy load. So that's a tricky one. And then do I prefer electronic note taking or paper? Both actually. So that was what I found that worked for me. This is going to be different for everyone, but I personally liked to use, I had an iPad, and you can also usually check out like iPads or laptops from your school if you don't have access to one. But what I did was I would download my course notes onto my iPad, and I would take like short notes physically with like the pen. I would write little notes on it. You could also print out your the lecture, or print out the PowerPoints ahead of time if that works for you. And then when I was retaking notes and rewriting my notes, I would use paper, and that's when I had my notebooks. I wanted to show you guys them, but they're tucked away in storage. But for me, I found that I liked doing a mix of them. Everyone's going to be different. Some people prefer to type everything. Some people, some people want to actually write it. So find what works for you, and then it can be a blend of a lot of different styles.
So the only thing I would add is that some people say taking notes on paper, you have that whole touch and feel. I personally like the iPad because you could delete unto your heart's content, and you could move things around. So once you write something and you're like, oh, I don't like it in this section, you could just literally, there's a great app called, I like Notability. I know Rachel uses Good Notes.
I love Good Notes.
Yeah, you guys are just weird. So but I use Notability, and you can basically cut and paste and move things around, rewriting notes, putting together content, stacking them up. I personally like Good Notes, but I personally like Notability.
Yeah, everyone's going to be different. That is a really good point. I did like being able to like drag things around and copy and paste stuff. But yeah, it's like I said, I really like art, and I really like drawing. So for me, it was helpful to actually draw something and kind of interact with it a little bit more. So that's just what.
Yeah, see, I have no drawing capability, and so I just like to cut and like paste literally the little graphs in the book, in the textbook, and just put them in my notes. And so this was like, oh, I just read this. Oh, I'm a visual learner, so to me that works really well to have those pictures in there.
Yeah, I think it's definitely what works for you. It's something that you're going to kind of want to think about and think, what do I like to do? It can be tedious, the rewriting everything by hand, but I liked it. So you just kind of have to find what works for you. How can I manage to do well at school and do research and extracurriculars at the same time? Yeah, so this is where it starts getting tricky.
I could answer this question because you're the same one that asked, so taking organic chemistry, physics, biology, all of those things, that is one way that you can't do research and extracurriculars because you're literally drinking out of the fire hydrant. So
yeah, it's tricky. You're at UCLA, so I do know a little bit about the that in general. You also asked for my email, and that's totally, I'm gonna put my email in the chat box for everybody. But for UCLA in particular, I do know that for research, you could get involved with the biomedical research minor. I don't know if you've heard about that one, but there's a minor that's specifically about research, and then you get class credit for that. So that'll help you, that kind of, it's two birds, one stone. You're getting class credit for doing research, and it helps your schedule be a little bit lighter. And then extracurriculars are a little bit tricky. I think, there's a lot of them are flexible. A lot of them understand that you're a student, and really first and foremost, your academics come first. So, I think right now you're taking a really heavy course load, so it's going to be difficult to add in extracurriculars on top of that. But in the future, if things are a little bit lighter, or if you have the summer available, then that's something that you could look into, and maybe do something over the summer for extracurriculars, or just look for something with a commitment of maybe 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week, which they exist. And then how to get letters of recommendations in big class sizes. Honestly, that's a tricky one. I think the best thing once you transfer to do for letters of rec is to go to office hours. Really show up for office hours, put your face in, talk to the professor. That's going to help you the most. Office hours, I really liked at UCLA because I felt like it reminded me of community college again, where it was a small group. You really got to talk with the professor. And I think that's going to be your best way to get letters of rec in big class sizes. You mentioned earlier that you're a transfer. So I think that maybe, you're going to want to get some letters of rec from your previous professors. And then if you do get involved in research, you can get a letter of recommendation from your PI. So that might help. And then for the big classes, I know the classes you were saying are, those are lower division classes. So I think honestly, your best bet to get a letter of rec is to wait until you're in your upper division major classes, because those are a little bit smaller, and then go to office hours and talk to your professor. And that should help. And at UCLA, a lot of times they know that students are going to be wanting letters of rec. So, they're usually a little understanding, even if they don't know you super, super well. But if you've been going to office hours and working with them, they'll still write you a good letter of rec.
The other thing is, I know at the big universities and also research, we're more likely to have a graduate student. And so I could tell you in research and a lot of other things, the graduate student is actually going to be the person that's going to, because the professor is going to say, hey, I've only seen this student 5 times at lab meetings or whatever, but you've worked with a graduate student for the longest amount of time. More likely than not, the professor is going to say, hey, write their letter of recommendation for them, and I'll meet with them and I'll add my notes to it and I'll sign it. Now, the professor's signature name and signature is what's important. But so if you're the kind of person who's not really good to graduate students or not nice to them, knowing that whoever has the most contact with you has the most impact on your letter of recommendation, even though if a professor signs it. Because most graduate students will say, my signature is not going to mean much. But if you get the student that will write it, and I know that a lot of people have found this the hard way. They're like, oh, I had my letter of recommendation and it was really bad. It was because it was more likely than not you were not very kind to you should be kind to everybody, but you weren't very kind to the graduate student. And so they're kind of like, well, this person's not, and the professor only sees you 5 times and they can't really make a good judgment on that. So, so even in the large classes, I know at UCLA, they have discussions.
Yeah.
So you may deal with your certainly in the lower division classes, you're going to deal with that graduate student a lot more than you would with a professor. So I would say and getting the point is you want to get a good letter of recommendation, a great letter of recommendation. And if it's a graduate student, then it's better than, the worst letter of recommendation somebody could write you is that Madeleine Babb was a student in my spring 2021 class. She scored in the 91 percentile or 99 percentile, and that's it. Like that's like doesn't really say anything about you. Or the best one, a good one is like, hey, I knew Madeleine Babb. She struggled in my class. She worked really hard. Came, we did learning strategies. She didn't score the highest grade, but she worked really hard and she knows the information. And so that's a better letter recommendation um than that one.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. And that was good. When Juman was talking, I did realize, but yeah, you're gonna it'll probably be your TA from your discussion section who is actually writing your letter of rec. So make sure you're showing up to discussion, you're doing what you can. And then also a lot of TAs will have office hours for discussion, and those are pretty much nobody goes to those. So you could sign up for that and have a better relationship with your TA that way. I went to a few just to like go over content, and most of the time I was the only one there. So the discussion or the class office hours for the entire class were usually pretty well attended. I'm going to say like 20-ish people, versus with your TA, it'll just be one-on-one most of the time. And then can you have my email? Yeah, I'm going to put my email in the chat right now for everyone. Pretty easy. It's just my name. So yeah, feel free to email me with that if you have any specific questions about transferring. And then I got a D in pre-calc last semester, and I'm planning to transfer to UC this fall. I've already sent in my application, but will that D affect my chances of getting accepted? Also, do I have to take that class again to make it up? Yeah, so I would say it could hurt your chances. I will say that it depends on the rest of your application. Like I said, I had an F and I got academic renewal and got that taken care of. You can do academic renewal on a D, but it depends on what the class is in. Like if you actually need that class, then you don't want to get it taken off your record. So I would say that you should probably plan on retaking that class over the summer if that's possible. And if you sign up for it, the UC system will see that you are retaking it and in the process of retaking it. And it won't be as much of a problem, but that depends. Like if you really need that class, then you should plan on retaking it this summer, unfortunately. But if you don't need that class, it's pre-calc.
Yeah. So I would tell you this, with a D, you cannot get into calculus and you need at least 1 year of calculus. The other thing is, like, I don't know where you go to school, but I know each community college has a counselor to that university that you apply to, or if you have a tag with. I would probably meet with them as soon as possible and talk to them. The other thing is that yeah, you definitely have to retake that class, and you could do academic renewal and take that class again. But you have to take that class again. So because you cannot get into any calculus, and I would tell you that I would not get into a calculus class without doing really well on pre-calc, because what you learn in pre-calc is a lot of algebra that you need and a lot of trigonometry. And your second semester of calculus, you will bomb if you don't know trig backward and forward. It's a hard class, and so and the thing is, like, most of the people say, oh, well, these are the intro classes that are gonna like stop me from getting into the classes that I need. And it's like, well, that's true, but there's a lot of skills that you need to take in those the more harder classes, because it's kind of like saying, I woke up today and I'm supposed to go run a marathon and I haven't run any practice runs. I would tell you within like 2 miles, I'll probably be on the side of the road, people doing chest compressions on me and not being able to finish the marathon. So what you do is you get up, you maybe walk for a mile, then you try to run a mile, and then you run like 10 miles, and then you go do the marathon. So kind of look at it from those intro classes. They're really for your benefit. And I know some people say, oh, well, like somebody I know that, oh, I really didn't take that intro class and I did really well in physics. It's like, well, they're more likely a stronger student. They've taken a lot of the other classes. That one person may be able to do it. Rachel, but some of us can't. And so, yeah, so you're going to take a 1 semester intro to physics class in order to not sink in physics.
And that's just to kind of add on to that. One, the MCAT did, pre-calc 1 was on the MCAT. I'm going to say that's the most relevant math class for the MCAT because you are working with logarithms, you're working with exponents a lot, especially I was saying the unit conversions earlier. So you really want to have your exponent rules down. And then 2, for pre-calc, you're going to need it for calculus. And I know a lot of us really want to transfer and get out of, community college and get to their transfer university and as quickly as possible. I think it is helpful to get to maybe, if you're at community college taking calculus, you're going to have a better time in general taking calculus with a smaller class where you really get to know your professor versus taking it at UCLA where you're not going to have as many academic resources available to you. It's going to be a lot more on you to do practice problems, whereas at community college, it's a little bit easier to ask your professor to help you or go to a tutoring session versus at a large university. So I know it's not, nobody really wants to do it, but I think if you can get as many of your prereqs done, which means getting your calculus done, getting your physics done, and not having to worry about those once you transfer, I think it's really beneficial, and I recommend it. It's frustrating. I know you guys saw, I spent a lot of time at community college. I think I was there for 5 years. I think I was at community college for 5 years total, maybe 6. I honestly can't remember. And it's a little frustrating. I want to get into med school and I want to start moving forward, but I feel like it gave me a lot of time to build experiences and to make good connections with professors. And it's worth it in the end. It's a long process. So I took a lot of AP classes in high school, but I didn't take the exam. Is it possible to get the credit still? I did not take any AP classes. So I'm not.
Yeah, if you have not taken the exam, it means that you have not taken the class. So yeah. And I could say that some of AP classes some schools do not accept AP classes for prereqs. Like for the, so you're going to have to take the classes anyways. But I've never taken an AP class in my life. So I know my nephews took them and they got college credit for it, but they ended up taking other classes for it. But yeah, if you haven't taken the class, if you haven't taken the test, it doesn't count.
And yeah, it doesn't count. Also with AP classes, I know at UCLA, I didn't see this so much at my community college, but at UCLA, I met a lot of students who had taken a lot of AP classes and then gone and accepted to UCLA as a junior, even though they were fresh out of high school, because they took AP classes and probably took classes at the community college too while they were in high school. And what I found is, those students actually had a really difficult time in their upper division coursework. They were about 2 years younger than everybody else that they were with. So, they're still 18, 17 and, 18 and getting ready to graduate from UCLA. Like, it's tough. It's not, a lot goes on in those years. And I don't know, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's just take your time, really. I think it's helpful to, it's not a rush. You don't have to rush to the finish line. And then do I have tips for note-taking as an auditory learner? I still struggle finding what works best. Yeah, so being an auditory learner, I think there's a couple different things you can do. So one, if note-taking isn't working the best for you, like that's not entirely necessary. You could record lectures that your professor is doing, ask them if you're allowed to use your phone. A lot of times students will put their phone up on the professor's desk at the beginning of class with the recording app going, and they'll just record everything. And a lot of professors are okay with that. You might need to talk to, some professors might not be, but I think that's worth a shot. And then also for auditory learning, when I was looking it up for this presentation, they were saying that a lot of times study groups are really effective because you actually get to discuss the information and you hear other people explain it in a different way. And that could be a really good way to get more exposure, like, oh, well, they explained it this way. And then building off of that, maybe if you don't have an actual study group, you could look up lectures online or like videos of people explaining different concepts. And just, I think it's helpful to hear the information in a different way. And maybe everybody's going to explain it differently. And if your best way for you to learn is auditory, you just want to expose yourself to as many different voices and as many different explanations as possible.
Yeah, the other thing is there's a software called Read and Write, and there's a mobile app called Speechify. I'm dyslexic, so sometimes I re-listen to lectures when I drive. Or another thing that I do is I talk into my phone, and I replay some of the things that I need to memorize. And that works really well for me. This app called Speechify, where if you like, this is what I do. I like the chapters that I'm supposed to read. I just take the pictures, I put them in this app, and I listen to it in my car. And it's a good way for me to read that instead of, reading it, because for having dyslexia, like it takes me, if it takes Madeline an hour to read something, it may take me an hour and a half, hour and 45. So what I do is I just listen to it first on there and then read it, and it usually goes a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. One of our previous speakers, he said that he would just show up to lecture and just listen. He didn't take any notes. He would just sit in lecture and listen to the material and really try to think about it. So, you don't necessarily have to take notes in lecture. That might be what works for you. Maybe you just want to sit and like absorb and really listen to the information. And then when you go home, you could use one of those softwares that Juban was talking about to either repeat the info, read the PowerPoint out loud to yourself and like have it take notes that way. So a lot of times, if you're an auditory learner, like talking through it's going to be really helpful for you to process information and to reword things. So, you could do that in a study group. You could do that by yourself with an app like that. You could even just do that, just repeating it. So yeah, I think that would be some good steps for you to take. Okay. Do we have any more questions? I know we're getting pretty close to the end time, but if anyone else has any other questions, feel free. I'm more than happy to answer. And then also feel free to email me. My email is down in the chat box, madeleinebabb@gmail.com. Yeah, we have some feedback. We'd love to get some.
We just launched a poll. If you could give us feedback on that. If you don't have any other questions, somebody said this is going to be posted both on our YouTube page. Basically, there's a link that's going to be on the site that you signed up, and you could rewatch it again and again and again and again.
If you want to, you don't have to. But yeah, it looks like that's it. Well, thank you very much for everyone for attending and for all the great questions. This was fun.
Yeah, and thank you, Madeleine, for putting together that presentation and answering everyone's questions. I know I learned a lot, so
I
thank
know
you for your time.
So 78% of you want to learn more about admission to medical school, and next Friday we'll have the Dean of Admission from UC Irvine, and until May, we're going to have almost every Dean of Admission from a California medical school giving a presentation, and those are all posted on our website. So instead of asking your friends or your grandpa's neighbor, you could ask the deans themselves. So